Today I'm going to be showing you how to add a vignette and a paper texture overlay in Photoshop for your Surreal World project. This is optional. You can add a vignette or a paper texture or both, or maybe you'd like to just leave your artwork as is. All right, let's take a look. Right now, here is a student's artwork, and he's created a really believable and realistic yet dreamlike world with this island, with the city scene, the kind of floating islands on top of the scaffolding, and then the island itself seems to be submerging into the ocean. All right, so it's a great artwork already, but let's see how it looks with some optional vignettes and paper texture overlays. To create a vignette, I am going to get my elliptical marquee and draw an ellipse around the center of the document. Now notice that I have flattened the document and there is only a background. So I would recommend doing the vignette when you are all done with your project and you have already gone to layer and flatten image. I'm going to get my elliptical marquee and I am going to type in a feather. When you feather the pixels, you make them more gradual. They blend easier and give it a little bit more of a sophisticated look versus not feathering the pixels, which would give it a very hard, crisp contrast between the darkened corners and the bright center. Depending on the resolution of your document, you might need to play around with increasing or decreasing the feather. This document is a little bit below 100 ppi, so I'm going to stick with 50 pixels on the feather. If your document is around 300 ppi, you might want to go for more like 75 to 90. With my elliptical marquee, I'm going to drag out a selection, fairly large selection, and kind of move it around so it's centered. My smart guide's telling me it's centered. There's those pink smart guides. Now, right now, my elliptical marquee is selecting the inside, the middle of my artwork. I want it to be the corners. So I'm going to go to Select Inverse and invert the selection. All right, now the marching ants are around the outside of the document as well as the ellipse telling me that the corners are selected. Next, I'm going to go over to the bottom of the layers palette and click on the Create New Fill or Adjustment layer. It's the half black, half white circle. From here, you need to select what kind of adjustment layer you would like, and I would like a brightness contrast adjustment layer. You're going to see a brand new layer pop up. That's your adjustment layer, and it says brightness contrast. The nice thing about adjustment layers is if you don't like it, you can delete the layer and the adjustment you made and preserve your artwork. Notice that the properties palette also popped up for brightness and contrast. It looks like my selection went away. It's actually now created a mask. And you can see that here with the linked mask thumbnail. And all I have to do is go to the brightness and decrease it. And you should see here how the corners have now darkened. And if I go all the way to the left, you'll see here's the transition, the dark to light. And because I feathered the pixels, it's a soft, gradual transition. And you can increase or decrease that brightness as much as you want to make that vignette stand out more or less. And also you have the option of increasing the brightness and making the corners very bright, which would usually make it look kind of like a sun exposed photograph. All right, but for our traditional vignette, I'm going to stick with the darkened corners. All right, that looks great. I could stop there and say, here it is. Here's my surreal world. I'm going to take it one more step. I'm going to add a paper texture and give it a whole new mood, a whole new look. All right, I went to unsplash.com and downloaded a photograph of aged paper. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up as a new document. because I don't want to make a picture clipping. I don't want to drag and drop it straight onto my artwork. I want it to maintain the high resolution. And this is a very high resolution image. So I'm going to get my move tool and I'm going to drag and drop it onto my surreal world. All right, you can see here that it's really large. It's zoomed in, very textural. I'm going to use my Navigator palette, which I have open. You can also go to Window, Navigator. And with that Navigator palette, I'm going to pull the bar and zoom way out so that I see my document really small, and here's all the scratch board. I'm going to go ahead and go to Free Transform. Okay, and now you'll see there's the bounding box. That's how big that photograph is. I'm going to go ahead and shrink that down and adjust it so that it's on top, still on top of the entire artwork. All right, and it's okay if I lose a little bit of the document because I just want the texture. And I'm going to zoom back in. Okay, so now it's opaque. We can't see through it, can't see my artwork. Let's go over to the layers palette and the layer blending modes. Let's drop down the layer blending modes and just take a look at all the different options here. So a lot of options look really good. I like multiply. And, some of them are too blown out, like lighten, but overlay looks really good. I'm still getting that texture, still maintaining the blues of the original artwork, but adding that texture. Soft light is good, a little more subtle. All right, some of these like linear light are a little oversaturated. Did want to show you, take a look at hue. Now, hue got rid of the texture, but it kept the color of that aged paper. So it gave me this completely new sepia tone over the whole artwork. And then color, layer blending mode, retains some of that texture and gives me that sepia tone. So there's about 4 different options I actually I'm already liking with just adjusting my color and texture with the layer blending modes. I'm going to go ahead and maybe go back to multiply. That looks pretty good. Or even overlay. All right, so I'm going to stick with overlay. And then you could also play around with the opacity. Right now mine's at 100%, but you could reduce the opacity of the paper texture layer and make that look even softer. All right, that's it. That's adding a vignette and a paper texture to your surreal world. Keep in mind that there's lots of different textures out there that you could add, like stone texture or cement texture or watercolor paint textures.